Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sasha Forson. I'm the Assistant Director of BioNebraska, and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar today, A Conversation with Emily Roller. Today's recorded event is hosted by Nebraska Women in STEM, an initiative led by Nebraska Cures and BioNebraska. And I also would like to note we just celebrated the second anniversary of this partnership where we kicked
What?
off our Women in STEM study. So exciting to continue to bring opportunities like this to you. At Nebraska Women in STEM, our mission is to reduce barriers for women in STEM and to create an environment where they can thrive. Part of that mission is bringing you event or conversations like this one today with Emily. Also, make sure that you regularly check our website, nebraskawomenInSTEM.com, for our Women in STEM profile series, as well as other upcoming events that you can be a part of. I will now pass things off to my Nebraska Women in STEM colleague and Executive Director of Nebraska Cures, Amanda McGill-Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Sasha. I am just so excited to have with us today WOWT's Chief Meteorologist, Emily Roller, to share a little about her career and predicting the weather. She started at Channel 6 back in 2021 and actually started her career in Nebraska. In Kearney, which is really excited. She's gotten to see some different parts of the state, eh? Then she left Nebraska for a while, where she worked in Colorado and then came back to us here in the Omaha area. Emily, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you for the little presentation you put together, and then we will open it up to Q&A.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Just a little bit of a brief presentation about what I do and kind of the path I took as far as my education and career. Currently, I'm working at Channel 6. This is the rest of our weather team. We have Rusty, of course. He is our chief in the mornings. I am the chief in the evening. We have Jarrett. He's a newer addition. You might see him if you watch in the morning. He does traffic in the morning. He's also a meteorologist, and he does our midday show. Our newest is Jade, and she comes to us out of Missouri. She was in St. Joseph for her first job. So this is her second job. You see her on the 3 o'clock show. And of course, we have our weekend meteorologist, David Keller, and you'll see him peppered in our weekday newscast if he's filling in or maybe doing an interesting story on something going on in the weather. Otherwise, you'll see him both in the mornings and the evenings on the weekend. He has a very busy shift. So a little bit about me. I am originally from Phoenix, Arizona. I grew up there, born and raised. I didn't leave until I went to school. I have a dog. He is 6. He's going on 7 in November, and a cat. She's somewhere between 13 and 15. That's Nyx. And she is a sweetheart. Outside of work, I love to cook, garden, decorate. But I've always been very good at math and science. So that's the career path I ended up going with. As I was going to school, or as I was thinking about going to school, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I did get a partial academic scholarship to the school where I applied for meteorology. So that's what I decided to try out, and figured if I didn't like it, I could always change my mind. But I liked it and I stuck with it. And so this is kind of my career timeline of what I've done so far. So 2008 to 2012, I was getting my bachelor's in meteorology from Western Connecticut State University. I'll talk a little bit more about my education coming up. During that, my last summer in school, I was a weather intern in Phoenix. And from there, I moved to Kearney, Nebraska right after I graduated. I was there for 2 years. I was at NTV News. I was the weekend meteorologist. I also did a lot of web content during the week. So I was writing for news, writing news articles. I had never written anything newsy before, but I guess they figured it was good enough. So they put it on the website, and I did do a few things on air as far as reporting as well. From there, I moved to Colorado Springs, and I stayed there for quite a while. I was at KKTV for my first job there. 2014 to 2015, about a year and a half, I was the weekend meteorologist, and then I moved to mornings, and I stayed there at the same station until 2018. I went up to Weather Nation in Denver briefly, and then an opportunity to do weekday evenings back in Colorado Springs came up. Actually, two opportunities did. And so I had my choice of that. And I went to the Fox station there, and I was there for a few years until 2021, weekday evenings. So the same shift that I have now. In 2021, I moved to Omaha, and I'm doing what I do now, where I am the chief meteorologist in the evening here at Channel 6. So I'm really liking Omaha. It was a surprise to me to move back to Nebraska. I did not think that I was going to move back to Nebraska after working in Kearney. But when I came down for my interview, I was like, oh, Omaha is really nice. There's a lot to do here. It's a little different than Kearney, which was just a little bit on the small side for my taste. So I do enjoy Omaha. There's a lot to do here. It's a great city. So a little bit about my education. I have a bachelor's in science in meteorology. I received a partial academic scholarship to Western Connecticut State University, and that helped me make my decision in what I wanted to do. When I was applying for colleges initially, I applied to several different schools, all on the East Coast. I really wanted to go somewhere different. I had grown up in Phoenix and lived there all my life, so I really wanted to experience something else. And I applied to pre-med, pre-pharmacy, even in a mathematics major at different schools. And I got in everywhere and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then this helped me make my decision, and I ended up really liking it. The main focus when you're doing a degree in meteorology is actually math. I was only one course shy of getting a math minor, but I was very busy. I was also in the honors program, which also adds in additional courses. So I didn't end up pursuing a minor in math. I was just way too busy, and I thought it was probably going to take a hit on my GPA, which my scholarship was GPA dependent. So that was a little bit more important to me than getting that minor. I did a lot of calculus, 1 through 3, some take 4, which would be ordinary differential equations. And that's where I stopped. I tried that class and I didn't need it for my major, and I knew it was not going to do good, so I just dropped it. But also in addition to that, we do physics, quite a bit of physics. You do 2 semesters of that, and then another physics course, physics of fluids, which the atmosphere is a fluid. So we're talking about the air, how everything works in the atmosphere. And of course, there are meteorology courses as well, but fewer courses in meteorology than there are in other aspects of like math and science. So on a typical day, this is what I do day to day, Monday through Friday. So I come into work 1:30 in the afternoon. If you do the morning shift, you come in closer to 2:30 or 3 in the morning, depending on what time your show starts. So that can be a very early day. But I do the evenings, so I'm in at 1:30 in the afternoon. It's a very full day. I think a lot of people see us doing the news and they assume we're very busy during showtime, and that's about it. But there is a lot that we do outside of that that actually keeps us much busier. So once the shows start, I'm kind of in my least busy time of day. So I come into work, do a quick checkup on the weather models and any minor changes to the forecast, just real brief, so that I can give a briefing in our news meeting, and that's at about 1:45. 2 o'clock, I'm done with the meeting. This is where we do a little bit more in-depth forecasting. I talked about Jade. I work with her in the afternoon and make the forecast with her. And we get that all set for our shows, which I start at 4 and then she starts at 3. So while she's getting everything ready for her 3 o'clock newscast, I get myself ready for my shows, do hair and makeup there at the station. We all do it ourselves. We don't have any special people for that. And by about 3 o'clock, I'm starting to get my stuff ready in the weather computer for my shows. So all the graphics that you see, we put that together ourselves. We sometimes make special graphics if we have an event going on, or if there's something notable in the weather that we want to put a focus on, we'll make special graphics for that. Otherwise, it's just kind of updating our hourly forecast, making sure the temperatures and the rain chances are right, things like that. And then at 4 o'clock, our 4 o'clock show begins. I have 4 main weather hits in that, plus a tease. Then we go straight into the 5 o'clock show, 2 more main weather hits, and then a final weather. Once our 5 o'clock show is done, things start to slow down a little bit, but we do have things we do in between. I have to record a couple of things that air on a sub channel. Then we record teases for the 10 o'clock show. At 6:30 p.m., our next newscast starts. So before that, I will work on writing our web article for the forecast story if I haven't already gotten to that. So at 6:30, we have our next newscast, 2 more weather hits, and then our update at the end of the show. And then I get my break. 7 to 8, once that wraps up, it is much slower for the remainder of the evening, but we still do have things that we need to do on that shift in the evening. So we'll update the weather app. If you have our WOWT weather app, it's free in the App Store. There's my plug if you want to download it. But you will get updates throughout the day, little forecast videos. So that's right about when I'll put out the evening update. After that, we do a live hit for Facebook Live. It's about 5-10 minutes. And that also streams to our app, our news app. And then after that, about 9:15, I start working on any updates I need to do for our 10 o'clock show. After 9 o'clock, we get fresh forecast model data. And so if there's any trends that I was watching that I thought I might need to change something for the 10, I might do that. And 10 o'clock is our last newscast of the day. 10:35 is when my day normally ends. But if you guys have been keeping tabs on the weather lately, it doesn't always end at 10:30. I am sometimes there until 2 in the morning, depending on if we have overnight severe weather. That's the crossover time for me and the morning shift. So if we have overnight severe storms, I will be there very late. How I forecast, I use forecast models. So all of the math, all of the physics that I talked about, it is so we have an understanding of the equations that the forecast models use to get the data and get the forecast numbers that they provide us. So I don't have to use any of it anymore. If you do go into research or maybe into developing forecast models or pursue maybe like a PhD or something like that, you would use those equations maybe more on a daily basis, but just doing what I do, National Weather Service, meteorologists as well, we don't use these equations ever. We just look at the forecast models and base our forecast off of that. Now, that's not to say we just rip it straight from the models. It's something that we look at. There's several, and we also keep track of the trends, how the models have been forecasting versus what actually happens. And we're able to kind of use all of that and mesh that together to create our forecast on a daily basis. So the forecast models are just a tool to help us make our own forecast, which we do make ourselves every day. This is my forecast sheet, just to get a little insight in what it looks like. We have a 10-day forecast. So I write down my notes on, these are the European model and the GFS. These are 2 main forecast models that I use every day. So I have a little section for each one. I make my notes. I have another section for notes from other forecast models or trends that I'm watching. And this is something that I leave behind for the next shift. So they also have a little insight into what I was thinking when I made the forecast. So that way, when they come in, they have something to base their process off of. And the shift before me also leaves a note for me coming in. So we kind of use teamwork in that sense. Even though we don't physically see each other on a day-to-day basis, we leave notes for each other so we can have a cohesive forecast and make notes of anything that we think is significant. So outside of work, I also do a lot as far as community outreach with weather, with community events, things that are not weather related at all. So here on the top left, there's a little picture from remix event that I did. That was for the women's center that there is in town. I hosted that event. That's Taylor Johnson, our weekend anchor. She went with me. I do a lot of events like that throughout the year. I'll do community outreach for weather, for really anything that someone might reach out to me interested in me being involved in. If I have the time, I try and make the time for it. I also do a lot of weather education. So on the top right, that's when I spoke with a group of scouts. So they were getting their weather merit badge. I went out to Iowa and did that with a large group. I do school talks regularly, focusing on weather. So typically our big time frame as far as when we're busy with these school talks is right after winter break. It seems like everyone goes into their kind of weather section, I guess, as far as when they're learning that in school. And so between me and Rusty, we do the most weather talks at the station. I would say we're doing at least 2 or 3 a week. So we are very busy with that. And also on top of that, we do things during station time. So a lot of what I do is during my free time. Everything that I just mentioned is done during my free time, either before my shift or on weekends. We also do stuff during station time where we have food drives, toy drives, and you'll see that on air as well. So I do things in my free time on station time as well to just be present in the community and try and give back a little bit. And also if it ties in with weather and education, that's always a plus. So it's a little picture of our 10-day forecast, not a recent one, but it looks pretty similar to our forecast that we have going this week, a little bit warm. A little studio tour. This is the desk and the large array monitor off in the back. We do weather there. We also do weather at the Weather Center. This is a touch screen. If you watch during severe weather season, we're using this a lot for our weather updates, our cut-ins, our continuous coverage. It allows us to play around on the radar and really talk about what a storm is doing. And then this is a smaller monitor. And this is off to the other side of the desk where we also do weather. And you'll notice none of these are green screens. We really don't use the green screen too much anymore. We did at our old station. This is a new station we got, I guess, 2 years ago now. And it does have a green screen, but we never use it. We have these big monitors, which is great. I think they look really nice and they are very easy to use. I don't use a teleprompter, but if you're looking at the cameras from the desk, this is what they look like. And each one does have a teleprompter screen up top for the anchors. So below they can see what's airing. If it's them, a camera shot of them, or if they're in a story or in boxes with a reporter, they can see that. And above that is the teleprompter and it tells them what to say. It has their script. So that's just the end of my little presentation on what I do. I hope it was informative and interesting. But if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Emily, that was terrific. And you covered so many of the things I had questions about and love that you covered your origins as well as like the science of it and the mechanics of what it is to newscast. I had no idea green screens were out and it's all the cool screens.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah, I had no idea the level of math that goes to the educational level. Like I think of the sciences and the atmosphere and that. No clue. I see one of your pets.
My dog. I think I'm probably getting a mail delivery. It's terrifying.
You said, and first of all, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you or unmute and we'll get to you in a moment or drop something in the chat real quick. But as a child, you said you always loved math and science. Can you talk a little bit more about that at all or how you knew that?
I just always was really good at it. And I'm not sure if it was a product of how I was raised or if it was just something that I was good at naturally. I mean, everyone has like an aptitude, but my mom is a teacher. So when summer break rolled around, every day I would have math worksheets and also required reading I had to do during the summer so that I wouldn't fall back behind when the next school year started. So she did have me doing all of that in the summer. Like I wasn't spending my whole summer doing math worksheets, but I had one I had to do every day. And yeah, so she was always very encouraging of that. I had a wide variety of other interests, but I guess it's just what I enjoyed and what I was good at. And it seemed maybe like a natural progression into college to do something related to that.
That's terrific. My other question before we get to other folks is just about this season has been crazy. There's been a lot of extreme weather. And I think all of us were kind of maybe caught off guard by those storms back in April with the
Yeah.
tornadoes that kind of hit the outskirts of town. What was that like? Both like predicting it and saying, folks, this is coming, but then also living through that experience in the middle of the day.
You know, it's interesting because literally the day before, and it was scheduled for the day of, but we changed it because of the forecast. I had an interview with a radio program just about the weather. And they were asking me what my most memorable weather day was that I've ever had in my career. And I said, oh, I really don't have one. And now, the very next day, I would have to say that that definitely is the most memorable. And I had done a story earlier this year for our storm week, and it had been about how our tornado number trends, based off of looking at the numbers since 1950, were really low for about 20 years. So, what happens if you look at the numbers? We have about 10 years and then a spike, and 10 years and then a spike. And then we've kind of been sitting for 20 years without seeing a big spike. And so I talked to them about why they think that might be, if there's any reason for this, because people who have lived in Nebraska for a long time, I think they've noticed, they're thinking, oh, it really hasn't been as stormy as what I remember growing up. And, you know, there's really not a good reason for why that is. It's more of chance. The last several years, our flow kind of that takes the storms through has been steering them into Iowa instead of into Nebraska. And this year, as we shift into a La Nina, that was one of my questions for the National Weather Service office. Like, how do you think that's going to impact our numbers? And it can tend to be a stormier season. And that's definitely what we've seen this year.
What was it like then? Like, as you don't really know what's happened for someone who's on air, who's using these different models, but also videos coming in from people, right? Like the different inputs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
As far as the coverage, I would say it was very easy for us to do. We had the whole team there. It wasn't a surprise that we were having a very busy weather day. Obviously, you don't ever expect a tornado to just roll through Omaha. I think we've gotten very lucky for a long time that we haven't had a tornado hit the city. They tend to miss, and there's no reason for that either. But we were as prepared as we could have been. We had the whole team there. We had chasers out live. We had video of the tornado. The storm that moved through Lincoln is the one that ended up impacting the west side of Omaha. And so we had video of that tornado as it was coming our way. So it really wasn't a surprise to us that the tornado threat was moving in. So I feel as though if someone were watching from start to finish, that would have given them a lot of heads up. I know that's not always the case. People aren't just glued to their TV throughout a whole severe weather event. They're living their lives. But as far as if someone were to tune in to get that information from us, to get the weather coverage, I think it went really, really well. It was obviously a very tiring day, but easy to do in the sense that we had all the tools we needed and the whole team doing that coverage.
I'll get to, I have a million questions, but I'm going to get to some of them. People have popped into the chat too here. Lauren says, my 11-year-old daughter is very interested in meteorology, especially our recent severe weather. Do you have suggestions for resources for education for her? She is a homeschooled student, so looking for those different opportunities.
I would definitely suggest trying to get, I mean, we do school talks all the time. And for homeschool groups, if you can get a group together, that's a great way to do a weather talk. So, although we wouldn't necessarily do something one on one, and it doesn't have to be through us, it can be through any station. We would be more than happy to do a weather talk for a homeschool group. You can also reach out to the National Weather Service office. They are all so nice. That's always the case, no matter what office is your local office. Someone there is always happy to talk if she wanted to speak with someone about her interests. As far as resources at home, I would just suggest finding age-appropriate books, weather books that can kind of teach her a little something that's not too complicated, but age appropriate, and maybe continue to kind of grow that interest.
All right, next question. How do you balance your identity as a woman, with your identity with your identity as a scientist? Is that an area you struggle with at all since you're in a more public position? Just that balance of life.
It's not something that I ever really think about. It's just kind of seems easy in a sense. I don't really find my job as a part of my identity. It's something that I really enjoy, but it's not also my hobby. So a lot of people who are also into weather, who are also meteorologists, it's also their main passion and their hobby and what they do outside of work as well. For me, it's something I enjoy and something that I think I do well. But when I'm not working, I'm not doing the weather, and I'm not necessarily keeping tabs on it either, unless I know we have some sort of big system moving in that I need to watch on my days off. So I kind of check out. I have my hobbies that I do outside of work. I really try and enjoy my free time and have a good work-life balance. That was one of my important things that I looked for when I was looking for my next job, because at some jobs in the past, it was very much expected that, you don't have personal time. And that's not something that I was interested in. So I don't know, I guess just prioritizing my time outside of work. That's something I enjoy doing.
Am I remembering on social media that you love food and cooking
Yeah.
as one of those things?
Yeah. I have a YouTube channel. I do right now bi-weekly recipes because storm season has been so busy. But I would like to get back to weekly, hopefully, when things go back down. That's something I enjoy doing.
That's really cool. Another question from Danielle. What sparked your interest in this as your career field? Which you touched on a little bit, but maybe we dive into that more. And those other STEM fields you were considering. And then maybe my addition is, why choosing on-air forecasting, I suppose, as opposed to a different way to use that meteorology knowledge?
So I wasn't necessarily more interested in one thing or another when I was looking at my degree. I really was very conflicted on what I wanted to do. If I wanted to do more, mainly between medical and meteorology. And so just kind of trying it out because I got that partial scholarship really, I guess, sparked it for me. And I did enjoy it. Once I started taking the classes and learning a little bit more, it was something that I really enjoyed. As far as why I wanted to do on air, I get really bored if I don't have some kind of creative outlet. And I feel like I do have that in a sense, presenting the forecast on air, because I have a little bit of creative liberty as far as how I'm going to present that, what graphics I'm going to use. And I really enjoy, putting those together and building new graphics and getting creative. One of our challenges at our new studio, I didn't show a picture of this, but we have, you might see me at it sometimes, it's 3 vertical monitors. And it was building graphics to fit that. So I was able to create a whole bunch of graphics and a template for building those so that we could utilize that space. So, you know, it just gives me a bit more creativity. And I have visited the National Weather Service offices, and they're fantastic and great at what they do. But I think I would be bored doing that job. Just, it's very much, you sit there and you work.
Well, having strong science communicators is so important in a world that is so reliant on science, right? And meteorologists are maybe one of the few science communicators we see on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So you can appreciate being driven towards that and the impact you can also have through that kind of work. Another question from Laura, and can't wait to hear more about this. So she says, I've heard a lot of mixed information on this, but what does like 60% chance of rain actually mean? Is that based on predictive models? How far does that data go back to support those models? So digging into that.
So what it actually means versus how we communicate it are two different things, because I don't think that people at home know what it means or should be expected to know. So a 60% chance of rain is a combination, or really any percent chance of rain is a combination of both the forecaster's certainty and the percent area of the forecast area that's going to get rain. So if you think of Omaha as the forecast area, and we were to say, okay, 100% of Omaha is going to get rain, but we're only 50% sure, then we would have a 50% chance of rain. That's what that means. And you could do that with any combination of those two percentages. You just combine that. And I don't think that anyone would know that. So when we say, oh, a 20% chance of rain, and I've worked at stations where we don't use percentages because of how confusing it is. It just means 20%, oh, slight chance. We get up to 30%, still slight, but a little bit better. We never use 50 because it's confusing. I think people think it means we don't know. Oh, it could rain or it couldn't. I think that's the communication aspect of things. It kind of makes you seem uncertain. And then once we get up to like 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, it's just an increasing chance of, you know, our certainty, a level of our certainty that it's going to rain. So when we use those percentages, we're just trying to communicate, is it a good chance or a low chance? But in some places that I've worked, we've said a spotty shower chance, we don't put a percent. We'll say rain likely, or just rain if it's going to rain, or snow. So it just depends where you look, where you get your information. And that's where I think communication is important as well. Rarely would I say, oh, we have a 20% chance of rain at 2 p.m. I would say, oh, we'll have a couple of spotty showers around. Most people will stay dry, but, you know, it won't hurt if you're spending a lot of time outside to have an umbrella, you know? So it's just part of how we choose to communicate it, to get our meaning across, I guess, but we don't use the percentages in the same way that they are intended.
Well, I know weather apps use them a lot, right?
Yeah. So if you're just looking at it, it can be.
It's like, what accounts for the variance from like app to app or station to station?
So as far as app to app, weather apps will either use their own like proprietary blend of weather models to come up with a forecast, or they just might really lean into one in particular. So I don't recommend using just a generic app because there's very little, if any, human intervention in that forecast. So it can be pretty good if you're looking at it maybe for that day or the next few hours. But if you're looking at it to plan your week and you're not going to check it again, I would say don't even bother checking. It's probably not going to be very good. But as far as what creates the differences when you're looking at station to station, we all make our own forecasts. And so I think we might have our own take on how things are going to play out. Some stations may not have the same level of teamwork. I know that there are some stations, I'm not sure in Omaha, where the chief is very much the only person that makes the forecast and no one can change it. So there's not as much maybe kind of talking back and forth and communication on other people's thought process in making that forecast. And I think that that can sometimes be a detriment depending on who's on your team. So it just depends on who's making the forecast, I guess.
How much flack do you get for being a meteorologist from like the people who are like, they never get it right?
It's always the same joke. And I've heard it so many times that I just don't even notice anymore. I just kind of laugh and go, yeah, bet you wish you had the same job.
I mean, it's unpredictable, right? I mean, it's predictable, but also unpredictable.
But I think it's better just to laugh along than to get defensive, because I don't think anyone ever means it in a mean way. And if they do, I mean, I'm not going to get into it with them. So
yeah, y'all doing the best you can.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sasha, yeah.
Yeah. Emily, question. So you mentioned no use of green screen at the news station. I think all of us, at least, if we know something about the news, we know that so often, meteorologists have stood up there to a blank thing and we're like, whoa, but we can see it on our TV. How amazing. But what other, since even probably in school, have there been any really big technological changes or changes in methodologies or even changes in how you conduct the news? I mean, are there any big things that you've seen on your end throughout your career so far?
Yeah, so in weather, there has been a huge change since I got my degree. And this was kind of right when I graduated. All of the radars in the country finally in 2012 were updated and are now dual pole radars. So what that means is instead of just a radar beam in one direction, it's in two. And so it gives us a better idea of exactly what's inside of a thunderstorm or whatever inside of a cloud. Is it rain, snow, sleet, hail? And it can also detect debris. So we can see if it's picking up debris and can confirm a tornado on radar. So that's one big thing that's changed as far as weather technology. But in the studio, when I first started out, we had camera operators, and there was a man who would physically move the camera and, be the floor director, tell you where to stand. And now that is very rare to see. Most studios are fully automated, and ours is one of those.
Interesting. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for Emily before we wrap up? Otherwise, thank you so much. How do you think that AI will impact weather forecasting? That's a good final question, perhaps.
I think it's going to be the same as weather apps. It may do a decent job at doing some short-term forecasts. I don't think it can completely replace people. It's just something that you need to have an actual person with expertise there for when we're talking about severe weather. And that can be when we're doing tornado coverage, severe thunderstorm coverage, or even when meteorologists in California are dealing with, that extreme weather, flooding and wildfires that they get there. I think that the aspect of severe weather, and we get so much of it across the country, I don't think that that can be trusted to AI technology. I just don't know that with so many changing variables and really the experience that you need to look at something and talk about what's going on or what could happen could be replaced with that technology.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Savannah?
Do have one. Hi, Emily. It's great
Hi.
to meet you. My dad is a farmer from central Nebraska, and he was mentioning that they are wanting to work with, like the agriculture community is wanting to work with the meteorology community, especially on the tech aspect and the AI aspect, to create more predictions for when next year would be a better time to plant, for example, or to harvest, or to, go down on irrigation or up on irrigation, depending on the models. Do you know anything about agriculture and meteorology, like those partnerships? I'd love to hear it, or if anyone else does.
So personally, I don't. I really focus just on the short-term forecasting. And when you're getting more into ag, you have to be more of a climatologist, and that is a different field. It's very similar. You can branch out into it, but it's not something that I have a ton of experience with. However, when I was in Colorado Springs, my chief meteorologist at my first station there, Brian Bledsoe, he does a lot as far as ag forecasting. He has a podcast for it, I believe, and he also does a lot of conferences. So Brian Bledsoe, that would be a good person to reach out to, and he's at KKTV. And I think he does it throughout Colorado and adjacent regions, so central Nebraska included.
That's really great, that just the different elements and the difference between meteorology and climatology and the long-term and short-term pieces. Really good stuff. Any other final questions? Can turn your camera on and ask if you're feeling up to it. Otherwise, Emily, is there anything you would like to leave us with? I don't know, any other thoughts or advice for women in STEM? I don't know.
I don't know why I didn't think to include this. I guess you never think about it until like it gets brought up. And you were asking me before this started about things, working in the field as a woman. So every year, the meteorology community, it started, a few years ago. We all ended up buying, like most meteorologists ended up buying, like the exact same dress from Amazon on accident, just because it was a really good on-air dress. And we started a Dress for STEM, which is every day, or every year, I should say, on Pi Day. Now it's transitioned from wearing the dress to wearing purple. And so we wear purple on Pi Day and then post about getting into STEM, especially the field of meteorology, as far as, the lack of women in the field. I believe as of this past year, the stats were less than 8% of the chief meteorologists are women. So we're just trying to get more representation in the field, or at least get people interested in getting into a STEM field with that hashtag and posting about it.
How cool is that? I'm so glad you mentioned it, because for the group, I was telling Emily before we got started that I had the idea, we should invite a meteorologist to talk to us. And then I looked and I was shocked that there aren't more women in Nebraska at the various stations all over the state. And so I'm so glad that you were willing to join us and to learn about that little initiative within the community that you helped get started.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I've enjoyed working in the field. I'm always one or two of the females on the team. So there's always a lot more guys on the team, but that's not really a huge surprise to me. I guess I didn't think about it too much because doing my degree, there was only like 3 of us. So yeah.
In some cases, the undergraduate level is maybe more equal, but in that field, there were still more men.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. Sasha, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just thank you very much for the great conversation. Appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I am going to drop a survey in the chat for folks watching this live or watching a recording of this, and have the link just to give us some feedback on this event, what you'd like to see next. We're planning a webinar for September on building your personal board of directors. We're bringing Katie Brandert back. She spoke at our first conference, and that was a popular session. So look for a date on that very soon. Otherwise, have a great week. Take care.